I've been waiting for this evening for 2 weeks. For 2 weeks, I held back my anger and pretended that everything was fine. In a small town like this, where everyone knows everyone, it's easy to find help to solve your problems. It's especially easy when problems are created by one of our own. But it's also hard to keep everyone else from knowing that you have problems. The sound of my electric blue 2011 Mustang GT's Flowmaster exhaust was music to my ears as I drove to school. I graduated from this school like most of my friends. I, like everyone else in the city, helped the school when it was needed. My wife taught at this school. Tonight, all the stars aligned. Today, there were two special events. The school had its annual grown-up night, which I love, and it coincided with my wife's birthday. I had been planning a special gift for her birthday for 2 weeks now, and she was supposed to receive it tonight. We were supposed to have dinner with her parents at one of the best restaurants in town. What happened before that was the reason I love adult night out so much. When I was young, I played in a band with 4 of my best friends. We often performed at school talent shows and concerts. As we got better, our performances turned into big events. And tonight, we were supposed to give a concert at the evening for adults. In fact, we often gathered for rehearsals, although we had all graduated from school long ago. I am 35 years old. I have a 17-year-old son who studies at this school and graduates this summer. Our rehearsals weren't anything serious. We gave up on the dream of being rock stars long ago when real life got in the way. In the old days, we were followed by 1 or 2 record companies. But college, kids, jobs, and girlfriends who mostly became wives took away the one focus he needed to make it to the top of the music business. I turned on the turn signal, looked in the rearview mirror, and changed lanes. Then I pressed the gas, and the car rushed forward. My mare loved to stretch her legs, and this was a great opportunity to do so. When I looked at the road with one eye on the speedometer, we easily overtook the white Dodge Challenger. The driver of the car looked at me and waved, then tried to keep up the pace. He didn't stand a chance. His car was great, and if he had been chasing anything in town other than my Mustang, the results might have been different. But my car was almost 200 pounds lighter and had 100 more horsepower. It just wasn't a fair comparison. As we entered a series of twisting turns leading into the city itself, it became almost comical. I modified my pony's suspension and steering using Ford's Track Pack steering system. It included many of the same suspension components that made the 302 Boss such a dreamy ride. I also had a few unique things on the car, including functional side scooters that directed cool air to the brakes. This, added to the cross-drilled and slotted huge rotors and huge brake calipers that were painted the same electric blue as the car's body panels, allowed my car to stop halfway on a dime. Being able to stop faster meant I could brake later and pick up speed faster. This was a lethal combination when maneuvering sharp corners at high speed. The Charger soon became just a small blip in my rearview mirror. It didn't matter since we were both heading to the same place. I needed to get there to get to him. And for him, getting defeated on the road, again, was just the beginning. A few moments later, I drove past the gate and into the large parking lot surrounding the school. I got out of the car and hurried to the back door. This door was typically used for deliveries, but during special events and performances, it served as a stage door. I felt in my pocket for my security badge, but the security chief, who was usually the school bus driver security guard, waved me off. "Good luck, Danny," he said. His expression told me how sorry he was for me. I tried to smile back and nod, but I'm not sure I succeeded. Even 2 weeks after the incident, I was still trying to comprehend what had happened. I was building further into the school, moving away from the door, when the sound of another car stopping abruptly alerted me that my former friend was not that far away. I turned the corner and leaned against the wall, listening as he started screaming and complaining about not being allowed inside. I almost laughed hearing him show his pass to security and be told that he was not on the list of artists. After a few moments of listening to his vicious anger, I had enough. I headed to the backstage area to see the rest of the band. I was the last one to arrive, and the other guys looked up when I entered. Nobody said anything. I think they were trying to gauge my mood. Friends do this. "Hey, Mike," I said as he looked at me from across the large room. "Are you ready to go out there? Are you sure you want to perform this song?" he asked. Mike and I, all of us really, have known each other since kindergarten. We played Little League together and played soccer together. We attended each other's weddings, and now that we were older, at least in age, we bowled on the same team and played golf together. Mike's concern was because he thought I would be embarrassed if the whole town knew what I was going through. I think he believed that such things should be dealt with quietly and perhaps in private. "Mikey, they say the truth will set you free," I told him. "One way or another, the city is so small that everyone will find out sooner or later. I'd rather come forward with this myself. At least this way I can let everyone know that this may hurt me, but I won't let it defeat me." He nodded at me and tried to smile. Pete started twirling his drumsticks and patted me on the back as I walked by. "It actually makes things better," he said. "Instead of kicking him out of the group, we should have kicked his ass, really." "I don't love that bastard anymore, and I'll never trust him again," John said. "But I still don't understand how his absence makes things any easier." "Johnny, Johnny, Johnny," Pete laughed. "When we play golf, it's strange because we always play with 5 people, not 4. How about bowling? The entire league is organized for teams of 4, rather than 4 people with 1 rotating reserve. Now everything will be easier, and honestly, now that we know what a, pardon the expression, scoundrel he is, do you really want him around your wife or daughter?" "No way," John said. "It's just strange. We've been friends for so long that it seems strange. It's like finding out that your brother was stealing from you. You know it's wrong. You're also angry. But deep down, he is still your brother. So you're still trying to figure out why he did it. That's all." "Listen, guys," I said. "I really appreciate you supporting me in this way, but I don't want this to be something that either of you feel bad about. If you want, we can vote on this issue and come up with something else. It's not too late to get it out here, and you can still play in concert." "Danny, you don't have to become a martyr," Mike said. "I'm not trying," I said. "Did you notice that I said, you can still play live? There is no stage on this planet big enough for him and me." "I'm just amazed at how you keep your cool," Pete said. "If it were me, I would have gotten into his ass from the very beginning. Both would be pretty beaten right now." "I wanted to," I said. "And there is a very real chance that this could still happen, but sometimes a beating is not enough." "The worst part is the betrayal," Mike said. "It could have been any of us. We are always at each other's houses. Remember when I went to Nebraska for a leadership seminar a month after we got married? Now I don't think any of you understand how glad I am that I asked Danny to look after Leanne instead of Greg. Greg was already married to Amanda at the time, and you were still single, Danny. It's also a fact that Greg lived right around the corner from me. But even then it didn't feel right." The door opened and my son, Jordan, walked in. "Everything is ready. Dad," he said. "Are you sure I can't?" "Yes, Jordy, I'm absolutely sure. I really appreciate your help, and I'm sorry to drag you into this. Anyway, we just need to press the button, right?" I asked. "Yes," he said, shaking his head. I took some bills out of my pocket and handed them to him. "Why is this?" he asked. "Why don't you forget about all this nonsense and go to Pacific Rim with Selena like you said?" I smiled. "Thank you, Dad," he said delightedly. Where will you be tomorrow?" he asked carefully. "Jordy, the city is not that big," I smiled. "Just look for the electric blue Mustang GT. If he is not in our entrance, it means he is somewhere else." A few moments after Jordan left, the 4 of us left the locker room and headed to the backstage area. Hank Hill provided the stage as his focal point. Hank was already over 60 and had once taught us science at school. As we looked at Hank, I noticed a small, energetic woman running around the area with a clipboard. She was short, no more than 150 centimeters, but she attracted most of the glances in the backstage area. Her long honey gold hair and sparkling eyes attracted the attention of every man in the room. As we stood there watching Hank try to pull a rabbit out of a hat, I barely noticed that she came up to us and started talking to me. "I thought there were supposed to be 5 of you," she said. "I only see 4. What's your name, handsome?" "He's sick, baby," Mike said. "Firstly, Michael Rogers. As far as I know, I'm not your baby," she said sharply. "But I could be wrong. To make sure that's not the case, I'll ask Leanne about it on Monday at work, okay? Rhonda, I would really appreciate it if you could refrain from doing this." Mike gulped. "I'm sorry. I let the excitement of the moment carry me away." "Okay," she said. Then she looked at me again for some reason. Then the moment passed, and she looked over her shoulder. "He doesn't seem to know he's sick." Isn't that him standing in the auditorium, holding a guitar and trying to get your attention? Mike opened his mouth as if he was going to say something, but couldn't think of anything. "I don't need to know," she said, looking at me again. "I just needed to make sure there was a band here ready to take the stage. Who is in the group is above my position and is not in my interest. Good luck, or whatever you say in such cases." And she walked away, holding the tablet in her hand, and her small but proportionate ass swaying with every step. "Bitch," Mike hissed. She immediately turned on her heel and nodded at him. I thought Mike was going to shit himself from fear. "Do you think she heard me?" he asked. I got distracted by Greg. He waved his guitar over his head, trying to get our attention. We all somehow managed to pretend we didn't see him. It was very difficult for me not to laugh. "Look at this idiot," Pete grinned. "He has no idea what awaits him." Greg, the whole day was like a nightmare. First, my boss asked me to come, and then he rescheduled the meeting for Monday morning. It was clear from the look on his face that this was not going to be the conversation where he would give me the promotion I was asking for. He then sent me out into the field to evaluate the new salesman. The salesman had just completed his probationary period, and we had to decide whether to hire him permanently or not. As a sales manager, I usually didn't go into the field. The seller had an experienced mentor who trained him. Usually, we would send another seller for evaluation. We did this because the person who trained him would probably want him to succeed, so he would be less critical. And since the mentor would also receive a bonus if his mentee passed, the new salesperson would be more likely to succeed. It all seemed strange to me, as if my boss wanted to kick me out of the office or out of town. Then I remembered another time when he behaved the same way. When he promoted me to sales manager, he sent me out of town on some stupid errands to get feedback from everyone else. I started to feel better. The only bad thing was that being in the field meant I missed the sound check. It wasn't a big problem. George, our sound engineer, probably just set up-level my amps and paw using Danny's guitar. We've done this before. But then things got even worse. I arrived here just in time to double-check the sound if necessary, but that idiot security guard wouldn't let me backstage. I even had to buy a ticket and enter through the main entrance. My friends were probably very angry with me. I'm guessing the security guard was probably on sound check and only saw 4 guys in the group. It was a confusing situation, but he was just doing his job. However, I was lucky. I saw all the guys together at the edge of the stage. They were talking to a woman I had never seen before. She was absolutely small, but beautiful. If I didn't already have a lot of things to do with women, maybe I would start a conversation with her. Hell, I'll probably do it anyway. The guys seemed to be looking for me. I jumped up and waved my guitar. I wanted to scream or something like that, but Old Man Hill showed his ridiculous magic. If I started screaming, I would definitely be kicked out of here. I tried to push myself closer to the stage, but the crowd wouldn't let me in. "Hey, I have to be on the show," I said. The guy in front of me laughed. I did the same thing in the 90s, he said. I took my guitar to concerts and tried to persuade people to let me closer to the stage or even backstage. That's how I met Bon Jovi one day, but that won't work today, buddy. So calm down before I call security and get you kicked out of here. A few minutes later, someone pushed me on the shoulder. I turned around and saw Betty Martin. Betty was Danny's wife. "Hi, Beth," I said casually. Betty was tall and thin, with shoulder-length, curly blonde hair and glasses. Like the guys in my group, I've known Betty almost all my life. I had to be very careful with her. In a small town like this, where everyone knows everyone, it wouldn't be a good thing if someone saw us together and thought we were too friendly. "Happy birthday," I said. I noticed that no one was watching us. "Sorry, I didn't buy you a present," I said. I was very busy. "Don't worry," she said. "You gave me what I wanted at dinner yesterday." "And many more places," I said. "So what will Danny get you?" I asked her. "Some jewelry and a trip to Hawaii," she said with delight. Mentioning Danny always made her smile. "How do you know?" I asked. "Danny loves me, stupid," she said. "He tries very hard to make me happy. All I have to do is drop a hint, and he starts working overtime or spending our savings to give me what I want." "What a sucker he is," I said. "It's a shame he doesn't know that you really want to be spanked. Or whatever you like, all sorts of perversions." "Shut up, bastard," she hissed. "Someone might hear you." But I could tell from her trembling voice that it turned her on. It's a pity that my old friend doesn't know that his wife loves it when I come with a stranger or two to give her sex. The funny thing about this is that he doesn't really know that I had her before he met her. I said, "If you keep talking, everyone will find out," she said. "Why aren't you on stage?" "I couldn't get past the back," I said. "Just waiting for intermission between the magician and us so they know I'm here. I have a guitar and everything else." "Oh," she said. "Beth, who is this woman with the tablet?" I asked her. "I can't stand this little bitch," she hissed. "Her name is Rhonda Barbie, and she's hot, that's what," I said. "Keep your pants in place, cowboy," she hissed. "The only woman you have sex with outside of marriage is me." "Maybe I'm ready for a change," I said. "Maybe I'm ashamed of cheating on Danny behind his back. He is my best friend." "And you were always jealous of him," she said. "Every time he got something, you wanted the same thing, but you always felt second to him. And every time you got something, he always had something better. It's like you realize it's me that's bothering you the most, right?" she asked. "You met me first, but were ashamed of me. You always took me to the forest and had sex with me there. Then you met Amanda and you got married. But when Danny and I met, he treated me like a princess. I fell in love with the way he loved me. So now he has me too. And you have your fat wife and a number of second-rate things. And if you try to replace me with Rhonda, or I even think you're trying, someone might mention to Amanda that you're doing this, and—" At that moment, the huge screen behind the stage lit up. He started showing various images, and then the band appeared on stage. My damn band played without me. I've played every show we've ever done since I was 14, when we were just making noise. I spent hours listening to recordings of our performances of every song in our repertoire. Two things immediately caught my eye. The first is that this song is not one of those that we usually play. Second, the band sounded better than ever. I can't say it was just because I wasn't on stage, but they sounded not only thicker, but also tighter than ever. I immediately understood why this was happening. Danny often experimented with using stereo for his guitar amp, sending one channel to each side of the stage. It also allowed him to pan and move his guitar parts from one side to the other for an interesting echo effect. He also doubled the number of amplifiers used. John also upgraded his bass rig and was louder in the mix than ever. The stage also seemed more spacious since there were only 3 people in front of them instead of 4 of us. Danny ran around like a man possessed, and Mike picked up women in the audience and sang to each of them. God, how I wanted to be there. By the middle of the song, which I recognized as Breaking the Chains by Dokken, the audience was singing along with them. Then I noticed that many of the images on the screen behind them, more than doubled in size, were photographs of Betty. "Why?" began a female voice behind me. "Shut the fuck up," I hissed. "Excuse me, Gregory," she said, and I immediately realized my mistake. I turned and stared in anger at my wife Amanda's personal eyes. "Sorry, honey, I thought you were Betty." "Why are you talking to Betty like that?" she asked. I was trying to concentrate, and she was annoying me, I said. "The band sounds great," she said. "Why aren't you on stage? Danny looks great. Look at Rhonda. She looks like she's ready to eat him. I think she dropped her tablet. Betty looks like she's ready to grab Rhonda. Do they know each other?" "Yes, yes," I said. "As you wish." "What is this song about?" she asked. "Is it about slavery?" "No," I said sharply. "It's about how to get out of a relationship with a woman who treated you badly." "Ah, I see," she smiled. "That's why he breaks the chains." "But why are there all these pictures of Betty on the screen?" After the song ended, there was the loudest applause I've ever heard, and then they started performing Danny's favorite song. They performed an absolutely amazing version of Black Sabbath's Paranoid. I was even more upset then. Danny was crazy. I was usually the voice of reason. I kept him from turning every song into a long guitar solo. But without me, he had to play all the rhythm parts, which only allowed him to throw in quick solo passages here and there. It worked great. Since he only had a couple of bars each time, this meant that he had to be very economical with his parts. The song ended too quickly. They left me wondering what they would do next. Danny and John stood directly in front of their amps and pointed their guitar's pickups at the speakers. I knew there would be feedback, and there was. John continued to face the speakers, maintaining feedback. It was brilliant, and the audience loved it. Then the spotlight turned on, and the video screen showed. Danny's house? I wondered why he would show his house. Then I noticed that it was not his car in front of the house, but mine, and I began to feel afraid. "Darling, this is your car, isn't it?" asked Amanda. I just nodded. Danny started playing Very Blue, the inviting opening guitar line over John's feedback. It was just the two of them on stage, and they had the audience in the palm of their hands. Then Danny's guitar tone changed to more distorted and aggressive, and he started riffing as Pete's drums came in and John launched into the heaviest bass lines I've ever heard from him. Mike's voice sounded really mean and angry when he started singing. "I'm knocking on your door, but no one answers." He ran across the stage and pretended to knock on the door of Danny's house, even as my heart pounded in my chest so loudly that it almost drowned out Pete's drums. "I can hear the groans and cackles of your vile laugh," Mikey sang, as Danny punctuated each line with heartbreaking blues guitar riffs. Every note he played seemed imbued with raw emotion. I could hear the hatred, anger, and pain he was pouring out through his guitar. The loudest sounds were the women's giggles and moans of pleasure, and then Betty appeared on the giant screen. It was her moaning, and we both knew it. We both knew who would be in that picture when they showed him, and she screamed and tried to run away. But the crowd, eager to get closer to the stage, kept us in place. Amanda looked at Betty and covered her mouth with her hand in shock when she saw that her friend had allowed herself to be filmed and shown in front of a crowd of strangers. "I'm bursting through the door as your breath quickens," Mikey sang on stage. The audience was torn between watching the scandalous scene on the screen and the band's performance. "Your trail of evidence leads to disaster," Mikey continued to sing. And then I realized that for my own good, for the future of my marriage and family, I couldn't let them finish this song. Mikey and Danny moved closer to highlight the changes in the music as they reached the bridge. Mikey moved across the stage until he was directly in front of Betty, who had no idea what was going on. "When I looked into your eyes, I thought they were sincere," he sang. Danny played feverishly next to him, in complete agreement with the sentiments of the song's lyrics. The pure pain on Danny's face went straight to Betty's heart, and she began to cry. But she had no idea how much worse things would get. Innocence can turn to lies, and now the finger is pointing at you. Baby, Mikey sang, his tone turning from pleading to reproachful as he bit into the simple, repetitive one-word chorus. Shame, 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 he shouted with all his might. You should have known better. He pointed his fingers straight at Betty, and the audience began to put two and two together. Why cheat on me? It was not Mikey who sang, but Danny, speaking directly to Betty. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that what was on the screen really happened. People around us also started pointing fingers at Betty, and she tried to run away, but the mass of people trying to get closer to the stage did not allow her to leave. She would have been better off trying to get to the stage and sneak out that way. Mikey summed it all up. You blame yourself for everything. Now it's time to feel the pain of your wicked game. It's so sad. Shame, shame, shame. When the audience started pointing fingers at Betty and laughing at her, I finally recognized the song, and I realized that my instinct was correct. I had to stop them before they finished that damn song. Danny made his wife an object of ridicule and scorn. They humiliated her even now. If they had gotten to the second verse, my marriage probably wouldn't have survived. Have you posed in front of the mirror? Mikey sang, accompanied by lightning-fast guitar lines from a now smiling Danny. Did you tell him, honey, honey, please? Both Mikey and Danny looked me straight in the eyes, and the faces that had always shown me nothing but love and friendship were devoid of any compassion. I realized that they knew, and there was not an iota of forgiveness left. I rushed to the edge of the stage. I thought I might pull the cord from Danny's guitar or the main cable from Mike's microphone. They both used wireless transmitters, but Danny's transmitter was connected to a receiver that was connected by guitar cables to his row of pedals and triggers on the floor. Before I could grab the cable and stop the guitar horn, Danny, my best friend almost since birth, walked up and kicked me in the face so hard that I flew back off the edge of the stage, spitting my teeth. I saw his face right before he hit, and there was nothing but joy in it. He clearly had no remorse for what he had done. Before my body could stop moving, the guards grabbed me. It was the worst moment of my life when my sweet, innocent wife turned away from me for a second when she realized that the naked man having fun on the screen with the new bitch in town was none other than her own husband. She rushed at me and tore my face before the guards grabbed me and dragged me out of the building. Since Amanda couldn't get to me, she took her wrath out on Betty. Betty was at least 10 centimeters taller than Amanda, but Amanda had strong arms and legs. She forgot about acting like a lady and gave Betty the hardest and best clean blow I've ever seen. All I remember before I was literally thrown onto the hard concrete surface of the parking lot was seeing Betty's head fly back as Amanda's fist hit her. Betty. I couldn't believe that one song put my life on the line. But the fact is that the last few days have not been the same as usual. I don't know why I never thought about this before. But lying on my back while two guards prevented an enraged Amanda from finishing me off was clearly not the time for deep thought. I tried to get to my feet, feeling dizzy. Every person in the crowd who was close enough to see what was going on booed me, and someone spat on me. It was hard to believe that this was the city where I grew up, worked, and raised my son. I looked up at the stage and saw my husband still there performing with the band, while half the women in the room were screaming and trying to get closer to him. Until now, I would have laughed at them because Danny never loved anyone but me. I grew up pretty wild, but my Danny was always a Boy Scout. I screamed his name. I needed to look at him and see the expression on his face. It was easy to argue with Danny because even when he was so mad at me that he wouldn't talk to me, I could just look at him and he would melt and forgive me. He loved me so much. We locked eyes as he began his guitar solo. It was strange. It was as if someone else's consciousness had taken over my husband's body. When our eyes met, I didn't feel anything. There was no love, no forgiveness, barely recognition. It was almost as if I was looking into the eyes of a stranger. But before I could even begin to think about what had happened, I was pushed towards the crowd, trying to get closer to the stage. "Hey," I shouted angrily. "Shame, shame, shame, you stupid bitch," responded the obviously drunk woman. I took a closer look at her and realized that this was the mother of one of my students. I needed to get out of there before more people started putting two and two together. I was injured. I was angry and my face was throbbing where Amanda had hit me. I needed to talk to Danny. I needed to beg his forgiveness and try to put this behind me. I decided the smartest way to handle this was to wait backstage and make him go somewhere where we could talk about everything. I also needed to find out what exactly he knew so I could decide what to say. I would also like to be able to contact Greg so we can keep our lives in sync and not get confused. It would also be good to know what Amanda knows and when she knew. But I think Amanda only found out during the song. If she had known sooner, she wouldn't have defended me when Greg told me to shut up. Then I remembered that today was my birthday, and after the concert we were supposed to meet my parents for dinner at my favorite restaurant. I didn't want my parents to get involved in this if it could be avoided. At that moment, another thought occurred to me. My son Jordan. Morningham. When I reminded him about the birthday dinner, he looked at me strangely. Then I should have realized that something was wrong. Jordan looked so much like his father, it was amazing. He threw me one of those cryptic phrases that teenagers love, and I didn't understand it at the time. "Jordy, make sure you're not late for the restaurant," I said, trying to hug him. He pulled away from my hug and threw a sarcastic comment over his shoulder as he walked away. "Like I'll be around," he chuckled. At the time, I chalked it up to an almost 18-year-old boy trying to assert his independence. My little boy was growing up, I thought then. He tried to distance himself from his mom as part of preparation for leaving the nest and going to college. I thought it was funny at the time, but now I understand that even my son knew about it. I wonder if he took part in my father humiliating me in front of all these people. As I tried to make my way to the door, the song ended and the crowd was going crazy, demanding the band come back for one last song. Looking at the stage, I saw that John had already left the stage, and Pete was walking away from his drums. Mike and Danny were talking to that little bitch Rhonda. This gave me a chance to catch up with him. I pushed through the crowd, forgetting about politeness and decency. It was an emergency. Outside the building, I noticed a crowd watching as Greg piteously begged Amanda to talk to him. They didn't notice me as I walked around the back of the building. I went to the door and opened it. "Hi, Ali," I said with a smile to the man sitting just outside the large metal door. "I need to talk to Danny. We are going to dinner with my parents for my birthday. Which way should I turn?" Ali, short for Oliver Wendell Douglas. Ollie was an armed school security guard and bus driver. He also coordinated security at large events such as the senior night. Ollie and I had been friends for a long time, but then I sensed something different in his behavior. "You can turn your ass around and go back where you came from," he said in an even voice. "No one is allowed backstage unless they are on my list, and you are not." "But Ollie," I whined. "Ass is what I call my ass," he spat. "Do you remember Nina?" Nina was Ollie's fiancée until she ran off with a salesman passing through town. It took Ollie a long time to forget her and what she did to him. The funny thing about this story is that he moped about it for over a month. No one could cheer him up, although we all tried. Danny and the guys took him fishing. They bowled with him and tried to teach him to play golf, but nothing worked. In the end, he was defeated by one thing that none of us thought of. It was the closure that brought him back to life. About 6 weeks later, Nina dragged her poor ass back to town and begged him to take her back. She had all sorts of stories about being scammed and how she just wanted to see what life was like away from a small town. She swore to him that she would keep her head straight and this would never happen again. Ollie smiled at her, but it was a strange, crooked smile. Then he told her, smiling that same smile, to get the hell out of her life and stay there. Since then, He has returned to being the same gentle and kind man whom everyone knew and loved. He married one of the local farmer's daughters, and they had a couple of children. However, Ollie had one blind spot. It was women who left their men. I think he expanded his description to include me, although I would never leave Danny. Yes, I remember her, I said quietly. Shame, 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 he said. Nothing more needed to be said. I turned around and walked out of the building just in time to see Greg getting into his car and spinning his wheels, trying to get out of there. Someone painted the words, cheater, traitor, and asshole, on Greg's prized muscle car. I felt a vibration coming from my pocket. I leaned over and looked at my phone. My mother called me. She probably wanted to know what time we would meet. Hi, Mom, I said. As I predicted, she wanted to check the time and make sure nothing had changed. After the conversation, I called Danny with my mom. I was shocked. He answered the phone and didn't sound depressed or upset. Danny, honey, we need to talk, I said. He didn't answer. After what seemed like an eternity of silence, he said, maybe we should talk to your parents after dinner. Great, I said. I knew this would give me a chance. I'll spend the dinner being as caring and charming as possible. I'll do whatever Danny likes. I will try to make it very difficult for him to simply reject me. I'll wait for you at the entrance, dear, I said. You'll have to find your own way. Betty, he said. I drove a Mustang. Danny, I know this car is uncomfortable to drive, but you like it so much that I don't mind driving in it. Maybe we can talk on the way to the restaurant, I said. No, Betty, he said. You can't ride in my car anymore. So this is my punishment, I asked. I can't ride in a car that I don't like anyway. Betty, I'm not trying to punish you, he said. You are a grown woman. You can make your own decisions. I'm not supposed to punish you. I just said you can't get in my car. This has nothing to do with punishment. Then why can't I go? I began. Because it voids the warranty, he said. Like this? Asked Eddie. It looks like this is new, he said. Ford sent me a letter saying that riding with a bitch in a Mustang will void the warranty. He immediately hung up. When I approached the restaurant, I looked like hell. I ended up walking those 3 miles. No one stopped to give me a ride, and I was splashed with mud a couple of times. I walked in and walked up to the counter, waiting for the hostess to seat me at a table. She seemed very busy, even though there weren't many people in the restaurant. She leaned on the counter and doodled something in her notebook while I stood patiently and waited. This has never happened to me before in this restaurant. They were famous for their excellent service. A few minutes later, I saw the hostess providing excellent service to the arriving couple, which surprised me. When the woman asked why I hadn't been seated, yet even though I had arrived before them, the hostess just smiled and said, "Shame, shame, shame," as if that explained everything. As she led the couple to their table, I noticed my parents sitting at a table in the corner. "Fuck you, you little bitch," I whispered to the hostess. "Shame, shame, shame that you even work." I walked over to my parents' table and hugged them both, sitting down next to them. "Here comes the birthday girl," said Dad. He stood up and hugged me tightly. "Where is my production director?" he asked. He's driving himself," I mumbled. "He had to pack his things after the concert, but he'll be there soon." And 5 minutes later, he really arrived. The hostess showed him to the table, pulled out a chair for him, brought him a menu, and hung a napkin on it. I wouldn't be surprised if she got down on her knees and... Anyway, I wanted to ask if she had any other clients to look after when she was just standing behind his chair. Luckily, another group of people came in, but she promised to return. Danny stood up and shook my dad's hand, then walked around the table and hugged my mom. "I'll miss you," he told her. My father, who rarely missed anything, raised his eyebrows. "Okay, let's order," he said. Danny pulled out a long jewelry box from his jacket pocket. "Let's do this first," he said, handing it to me. I opened the box and saw a beautiful diamond necklace and a bunch of neatly folded papers. I knew that in the paper, sir, there are details of our trip, but the necklace was so beautiful that I couldn't take my eyes off it. I really didn't want to do this, but under the circumstances I have no choice, Danny told my father. It will be easier for you, sir. Danny handed my father a set of documents. I watched my father open his papers. I decided to open mine and find out where we were going on our trip. No, I screamed. You said we would talk after dinner. Danny, we need to talk about this. Everyone should have a second chance. I'm sorry. I don't want a divorce. The moment I started screaming, my father threw the papers on the table and screamed too. What the hell is going on here? He shouted. Did someone offer you more money? I'll match the bet. Dad, this isn't about the money, Danny said. I don't want to leave, but I think because of the divorce it will be better for you. Betty is your daughter. After all, we shouldn't put you in that position. What scam? Asked my father. I filed for divorce, Danny said. My mother looked at him in surprise. That's when everything changed. The door to the restaurant burst open and Greg burst inside. Why, Danny? He shouted. Why couldn't you discuss this with me like a man? Why did you have to make all your lousy little plans behind my back? Greg's face was swollen. He spoke indistinctly. At least 3 of his front teeth were missing. He was so angry that his eyes sparkled. You mean the time you slept with Betty behind my back? Danny asked calmly. Danny even smiled. Betty, have you cheated on Danny? My mother asked in surprise. But Betty, he loves you and treats you so well. Because of you, Amanda is divorcing me, Greg shouted. I am kicked out of my own home and cannot see my children. You ruined my life. Did I ruin your life? Danny laughed. If you hadn't slept with my almost ex-wife, none of this would have happened. You yourself ruined your life. And if Amanda does divorce you, it will end up working out in your favor. I'm kicking Betty out too, so you two can be together, Danny said. Are you crazy? Greg was indignant. She's a damn available girl. I don't want to be with her. I slept with her on and off long before you met her. Amanda is the only woman I've ever loved, and you ruined everything. We have 3 children, Danny. They'll do better without you, Greg, Danny said. Did you think about her or your children when you were with Betty? Of course not. You're a bastard, and you both deserve each other. Greg was so furious that he lunged at Danny. Danny dodged, and Greg ended up scattered across our table. Greg stood up and swayed over to Danny. He swung, but Danny retreated, and then Danny punched him in the stomach so hard that Greg curled up around Danny's fist. Then Danny punched him in the mouth and knocked him to the floor. We were friends once, Danny said. Never again. From now on, anyone who is your friend is not my friend. Shame, shame, shame. Danny was about to leave, but my father stopped him. Okay, you two are getting a divorce, my father said. It's personal. Now we need to discuss matters. I'm sorry for what my daughter did, son, but my business needs you more than her. She doesn't work for my company. See you at work on Monday. When Danny left the restaurant, I stood up and ran after him. He got into the car and drove away. I've seen him get into that car and drive away from me literally hundreds of times. But this time it was different. It was as if he took my heart with him. I dropped to my knees and started crying. Greg. I woke up in a holding cell. I looked around and discovered that I was alone. My face was in a lot of pain, and one eye was completely closed. But more than the physical pain, it hurt in my soul. Of course, I wasn't thinking about the physical heart. I thought about the metaphysical heart that symbolized my soul. If it was possible to feel like there was a huge hole in him, then I did. Actually, I had 2 holes, and I wasn't sure which one hurt more. Over the course of my life, I have met many women. My friends were not like me. During college, they pursued their careers, sports, and music while I tried other things. I was involved in various kinks. While each of them was dating and making plans to get a girl in college, I slept with everyone who was not nailed down. I never told my friends about this because they would never understand. They were too ordinary sexually. Everyone has had dreams of finding their special someone and living their ideal life. But for me, all the women were easily accessible. Some were more difficult to obtain, but under the circumstances, anyone could be one. I met Betty long before she met Danny. She was one of the coolest girls I've ever met. Betty was literally willing to try anything with anyone. It's amazing that she didn't have any illnesses. I once saw her on a night when she couldn't get into a sex club, so she had sex with a group of homeless people in the park. In those days, I didn't like to get attached to women, so we slept together a few times, maybe many times, but there were no feelings between us. She had a good body, but there were plenty of women like that. We lost sight of each other after a while. I didn't miss her. We've never actually met. Everyone who knew her understood what kind of girl she was. I didn't want to associate myself with her. This would cause too many problems. I didn't see myself with a woman that anyone could fuck. Then there would be problems with guys looking at me and laughing because they slept with my woman. Besides, I didn't have any feelings for her. There were much more beautiful women. On the other hand, my friends, especially Danny and Mike, were my family. We grew up together, studied together, and graduated together. But the strangest thing happened in the last 2 years of study. During the summer holidays between my second and third years, I met Amanda when he was on summer vacation. Her family had just moved to town, and I was fascinated. I didn't know what it was about her that attracted me. She wasn't any particular beauty, but there was something about her. She was terrible at sex. She rarely let me get close, but she had me hooked. By the summer before her senior year, she became pregnant, and we got married, and I couldn't be happier. When we returned to university for our final year, Danny somehow met Betty, and they both fell in love. Betty and I pretended not to know each other. The most surprising thing to me was that she really loved Danny as much as she claimed. She completely stopped doing everything she did before. She was absolutely faithful to him. We talked about it a couple of times, and I told her that if she ever hurt him or cheated on him, I would make her life hell. They eventually got married and were very happy. Life with Danny changed Betty. She stopped being just a tall, thin blonde with small breasts and became a truly attractive woman. She began to behave in a very dignified manner, and after several years of marriage, she returned to university and became a teacher. They were the happiest couple I knew, and after the birth of their son Jordan, they were the perfect family. I have to admit that although I loved Amanda, after the birth of our 3 children, she was never able to get rid of the extra pregnancy weight. I started looking at Betty and wishing I was with her instead of Amanda. All the people at school who knew what a bitch she used to be didn't live in our small town. Here at home, she was just a wife and mother. Around that time, I started to reevaluate my life and noticed that I was always second to Danny in everything we did. At least once I wanted to bypass it. So I started talking to Betty about old times. Then I started putting pressure on her. I still remember the day she burst into tears and refused me. She was sure that I would tell him about our past, but I didn't. No matter how much I wanted her, I couldn't do anything that would hurt Danny. I told her that this was just a test of her loyalty to my best friend. It took a few years after all the stars aligned, and one day when Danny was on a business trip with her father, she and I had a drink and ended up sleeping together. It awakened something in both of us. We were both in love with spouses who did not share our need for kinky, unbridled sexual expression. Again, there was no love. I had no desire to be with her or leave Amanda for her, and she claimed she didn't even love me. But she needed what I gave her, as well as Danny's romantic caresses. She always told me that Danny filled her heart and soul, and I only scratched her itch sometimes. Over time, we began to take things for granted. That's probably why we got caught. And now, because of something that was as natural to us as Danny washing his car every other day, my life and happiness were at risk. I think on some level I had regrets. Perhaps I regretted being caught. But I also regretted that I was humiliated. Hell, I might as well admit the truth. I was angry that the guys did the show so well without me. I was also upset that my wife kicked me out of our house. Moments like these allowed me to understand what was truly important in life. I was willing to do whatever it took to get my wife and friends back. "Okay, buddy, you can go," said the fat policeman who was on duty in the cell. "Where?" I asked. "I can't go home. My wife." "Listen, kid, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here," he said. "If you're looking for somewhere to go, I'd start by going to the dentist." He laughed. I checked into the hotel and made an appointment with the dentist for early Monday morning. Then I remembered the meeting with my boss and scheduled it for Monday afternoon. When I woke up the next morning, I decided the best thing to do was go and apologize to the guys. I was sure Danny wouldn't be at the bowling alley. He will be devastated and oppressed. But I could start with the guys. If they would forgive me and take my side, they could help me with Danny. If Danny forgives me, it will probably help me get Amanda back. With these thoughts, I came to the bowling club early in the morning. I nervously waited for my team. They all came together. I was shocked to see Danny there. They talked as if nothing had happened. As they passed me, not one of them looked me in the eyes. They signed up, played their games, and left. I tried to talk to them several times, but they ignored me. I returned to my hotel room. The next day, I showed up at the golf course and got the same reaction. On Monday, I came to work and went to a meeting with my boss. He fired me. He said that my relationship with a married woman lowered the company's public profile and they had to fire me. When I looked at him, I realized that he knew about my relationship with Betty even before Friday. He was going to fire me then, but decided to let me simmer over the weekend. I immediately realized that I was fired because of my actions with Betty. I was also sure that Danny had something to do with it. My ex-best friend systematically ruined my life, and I had to admit that I deserved it. Danny wasn't perfect. He had his shortcomings, but he was always the perfect friend. He always supported me when I needed it throughout our lives. One of the things I hated most about Danny was how happy he was with what he had. The man seemed to have no ambition. In fact, when we were younger and serious about music, it was Danny who convinced us all to get an education first before trying to go to California to become rock stars. He was right, of course, because we played mostly heavy metal, and just as we were about to go to California, the music changed. Metal bands couldn't make it big. Everyone wanted alternative rock and emo. We would have starved to death and returned home with our tails hanging down. The only thing Danny really wanted was his Mustang and Betty. I always laughed at how much he loved her. At first, when I was angry with him or jealous of him, I thought to myself, if only he knew what she was like before. It's gotten even worse lately. We are now in our mid-30s, and this is a time when we are not yet old, but no longer young. This is the time when a man begins to evaluate his life and thinks about what he has and where he wants to strive. I looked at my life and realized I was left behind. But Danny, of course, was so happy that he was glowing. And this happiness was visible to everyone. People like Danny. They tolerated me. Even looking at our small group, Danny and Mike were clearly the center of attention. If we were the Supremes, Danny and Mike would be Diana. I wanted to be Diana, and there was more to it than that. Even among us, Danny was just happy with his damn life. We all know what guys say, but we could go to the cinema or watch a football match on TV, and inevitably some beautiful woman would appear on the screen. As guys, we naturally had to comment on this, but you could always count on a comment from Danny like, "She's beautiful, but she's no Betty. I don't know what I would do with her." What was even dumber was when we watched movies or TV shows about women who did dirty things. No matter how beautiful those women were, Danny would always say something like, "I could never be with a woman," which could do something like that. Sometimes it was all I could do not to explode with laughter and then admit that his perfect angel was pleasing homeless people in public. I hated Danny, but at the same time, I would kill anyone who looked askance at him. When Danny was unhappy with me, it really hurt me. But when he praised something I did or said, it lifted me up. Too late, I realized that I loved this idiot. Danny was the closest person to me in this world, almost like a brother, and I betrayed him in the worst way possible. The poor guy only cared about two things, that damn cat and his wife. And I ruined his relationship with her. And knowing what a Boy Scout Danny was, he would never forgive her. He will probably spend the rest of her life in solitude and solitude. I ruined this poor man's life without even meaning to. What was just fun for me and Betty destroyed 2 marriages. If you count the 4 children we had between us, 8 people were affected. And if you take into account all the guys in the group, 5 families and 19 people were affected. And it was all because Betty and I were selfish. Betty. On Monday morning, I woke up and quickly got dressed. I was already late and acted automatically. The fact that I was in my parents' house and not my own was not lost on me. After being here all weekend, I just needed to get out of there. My parents were very kind to me, considering the circumstances, but the looks of suppressed anger and disappointment in their eyes were painful. My mother tried to hide her disappointment and the pity that I sometimes saw in her eyes. My father, on the other hand, was just angry. He tried to hide it, but I couldn't blame him. Men approach things differently than we do. They are proud of things we will never understand. And just as Danny loved his Mustang, my father felt about his business. He started it from scratch and turned it into a growing and successful company. A huge part of this success was due to Danny's expertise in production and quality control. I had a feeling that if Danny didn't show up for work in the morning, my father would throw me out, or at least be very close to it. I was his daughter, but this company was his heart. And since he had no sons to pass it on, all his hopes of continuing to own and run the family rested with Danny and my son Jordan sometime in the future. Jordan was too young to even consider it now, and we had no idea what he would want to do. These 3 days were the most terrible of my life. I hoped it was all a dream, but waking up at my parents' house reminded me that it was true. After the horror of the concert and then dinner with my parents on Friday night, I woke up Saturday morning and reached for Danny, only to realize that my hopes for a bad dream were in vain. I immediately called him, both on his cell phone and on his home phone. He didn't answer them. I left messages on both of them, hoping that maybe he was just out running in the woods near our house, like he usually did. When several hours passed and I did not receive an answer, I called again and called. Then I decided he was too angry at me to talk, so I decided to come to his house and talk in person. When I pulled up in my mother's car, he barely blinked. He was sweet to the car, as if nothing had happened. I couldn't believe it. My heart was breaking, but he calmly washed the car. When I approached him, he continued to apply wax or something like that to the car. "I'll be leaving soon," he said. "I didn't expect you, but since you're here, let's end this now. For today, do not take anything that does not belong to you personally. I'll get some of those pink and blue stickers by next weekend." "What?" I asked. I didn't understand what he was talking about. "You know," he said, "you mark everything you want to take with a pink sticker. If I want it, I mark it in blue. If both colors end up on something, we'll argue about it when we see the lawyers." "Danny, we don't need those damn sticky notes," I said. "That's not why I'm here." He didn't say anything. Calmly, he took a bottle of some kind of polishing product, turtle wax. He squirted some of it onto the car and started polishing it. "Why are you here?" he asked calmly. "I already gave you what you asked for." "I'm here because I want to make things right. I want to go home." I said, "What do you mean by giving me what I asked for?" He threw the rag and stood up. "Do I need to send you a copy of the video?" he asked. "That's almost what I heard the first time you said that to Greg. You told him you wished you didn't have to sneak around, remember? You said that then you could get rid of the boring people in your life, and he could have all the you he wants. So I'm giving you the divorce you want. I gave you the papers myself so that you would not be so ashamed." I didn't realize there would be so many people at the concert. Sorry. Is this really what you think? I asked. He turned away from me and took out a new microfiber cloth. Once the first one touched the ground, he didn't use it again until it was washed. He was afraid that the dirty particles would scratch his car. Danny, it was all nonsense. I didn't mean anything I said, and Gregor, you're the only man I've ever loved, and Greg loves Amanda. We just... Then I made a big mistake. I tried to touch him as I had done thousands of times. I didn't expect him to react with such disgust at that moment. Even before my hand touched him, he sharply recoiled from me. "Get away from me," he suddenly shouted. "You do not love me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done it." I saw it then. Confidence, calmness, apparent indifference, all this was just a mask. When the mask fell off, I saw the anger and all the pain he was hiding behind his macho mask. I saw the tears that he tried so hard to turn away. I knew this man better than anyone else. I lived with him and slept with him and shared his joys and sorrows for almost 20 years. I hurt him more than anything else ever could. His pretending that he didn't care and didn't care was his only way to maintain his pride. I was so busy with my own feelings and my own pain that I didn't pay enough attention to what I did to Danny. Then I began to realize the full extent of what was happening. I realized this wasn't going to be a quick fix. An apology and a blowjob won't even come close to fixing this. I'll be very lucky if this doesn't change our marriage forever. The simple, loving relationship I enjoyed with Danny and the knowledge that there was nothing for me that he wouldn't do was probably gone. It may take years for us to get anywhere close to this. We'll probably be closer to some of the other couples we've known. We will be like couples who live together and stay together for the sake of the children, or because they have been together for a long time. I always felt superior to them, and at the same time felt sorry for them. Now I'll be lucky if I just end up being one of them. "Danny, I know how hurt you are," I said. "And although I don't want it, you probably need some time to think. I'll give you a few days, and then maybe we can talk. If you really want what I want, you should hire a lawyer so we can speed up the divorce," he said without turning around. "I really will. It's better when you get out of my life." It hurt me more than anything has ever hurt me. I wasn't him. I didn't see the need to hide my feelings, so I let the tears flow. I had nothing and no one to blame for this but myself. I returned home and spent the rest of the day gloomily. I hoped that time and distance would give Danny a chance to think about what we might have lost. I hoped that he would start to miss me and think about giving me a chance to make things right. Things got worse on Sunday. My mother convinced me to leave the room. I sat on the back porch, thinking and trying to figure out what I could do to get Danny to talk to me. My father came out and looked at me. He shook his head. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like hell," I replied. "Imagine how Danny feels," he said. "At least you knew what you were doing, I guess. Imagine yourself in his place. He must be feeling very bad right now. Imagine feeling like you weren't enough for your wife, so she had to look elsewhere." "Shut up, Dad," I screamed. "Danny is more than enough for me." It was. "How does he know this?" he asked. "And imagine how awkward he is. I think about how this affects Jordan. Everyone in town knows about it now. I wonder how my son likes being the son of an easily accessible city girl." He saw the shock on my face and shook his head again. "You haven't even thought about Jordan, have you?" he asked. "Damn, you're worse as a wife than as a mother. At least call him so he knows you're alive." That's what I did. I called him, and like his father, he didn't answer the call. I started to worry, so I asked my mom to call him, and he picked up on the first ring. I listened to their conversation. He sounded fine. He spent the day with friends and slept at home as usual. Since neither he nor his father liked to cook, they went to a cafe for breakfast. As soon as she handed me the phone, his mood changed. "Hi, Jordan, how are you?" I said. "Fine," he replied. "Shouldn't you be worried about Dad? I'll leave this summer and probably live somewhere else after college. Dad will have to live with what the people in this small town think about what you did and how it affects his reputation. I know, Jordan, and I'm so sorry. I would do anything to fix this for both of you, but he interrupted me. Mom, do you really want to do something for me? He asked. Yes, honey, whatever, I said. Then don't call me again, he said and hung up. I started crying even louder then. Betty, he didn't mean it. He's just embarrassed and hurt, my mom said. You are a strong family. Just give it this time, and everything will work out. You will be together again, don't you know? I didn't feel hungry last night. I stayed in my room, so this morning I was ready to go out and do something. I needed something to do other than sit and think about how stupid I was. The commute to work was strange. I asked my mom to take me to the house so I could pick up my car. She called Danny the day before, and he didn't mind me taking the car. He reminded her that in his divorce proposal, everyone keeps their things. My goal was to get there just before he usually leaves for work. I was hoping to talk to him or even just wish him a good day. I thought that any, even small, politeness could remind him that I love him. But we were unlucky. Danny has already left. Crap, said my mother. I just looked at her and smiled. I was going to invite him to dinner. Damn it, she said. I just smiled and hugged her. Sometimes I wished my life could be as simple as hers. My mother thought that any and all problems could be solved over dinner. I took a deep breath, got into the car, and drove away. 20 minutes later, I arrived at the teacher's office parking at the school. I got out of the car. My hands were full of books and a laptop. Even the thought of something as small as my computer made me think of Danny. My laptop was years ahead of what teachers were typically given. Of course, it was given to me by Danny. He was given this laptop at work, even though he didn't really need it. He had a great desktop computer at work and another at home. Of course, he needed it one day at a meeting. He brought everyone in the meeting to his office to show off his designs. They, of course, liked everything. But after the meeting, my father took him aside. My father told him that it was because of meetings like this that he gave him this advanced laptop that could connect to any projector via Wi-Fi. He told my father that he would pay for the laptop. My father just looked at him and laughed. You gave it to Betty, didn't you? He asked. He shook his head and told Danny to have it give him another laptop. I had to get back into the car because suddenly I started crying again. It took a while to gather my thoughts. Just 72 hours ago, I was happily living a double life. I cheated on the person who loved me more than anything in the world, and I thought I was the smartest bitch on the planet. I never thought I would get caught. I never considered what I could lose if I were caught. I needed to stop looking at cards. I had two choices. I could put the cards away and move on with my life, or I could pick them up and build my house again. It was my choice, and I would build it higher, stronger, and even more filled with love. Just thinking about what I was going to do made me feel empowered. I began to view winning my husband's love as a sacred quest that I needed to complete. At the end of this quest, I would get my Danny back. My back straightened and my step became more confident as I walked down the corridor. I felt empowered. Then I saw her walking down the corridor towards me. This bitch hated me for almost 20 years. She smiled at me as we approached each other. Then she stopped to talk to me. Don't worry, she said very sweetly. I was shocked. Given our past, Rhonda was the last person I expected to be sympathetic. I'll take good care of Danny. In a year, he won't even remember you. Oh, which side of the bed does he like to sleep on? If I weren't so shocked, I would have strangled this bitch right in the hallway. I shook my head to clear those thoughts as her laughter echoed distantly down the hallway. I arrived at my class a couple of minutes before class. I expected to see most of my 20 students. Of course, a couple of them would be late, as always. I wasn't prepared to face a class with only 2 students. This was especially bad because they were 2 of my worst students. I sat down and set out my things, and they didn't even look up. A few moments later, there was a knock on the door. My boss, the school principal, entered the classroom. He looked at my students and shook his head. "Why don't you get out your phone and text someone?" he said. "She doesn't let us use our phones in class," Seth Wyatt said. "Well, then go down to the study hall and write as much as you like," he said. Against the backdrop of two children screaming and running down the corridor, he turned to me. "Betty, we have a problem," he said. "Is this because the school is empty?" I asked. He looked at me and shook his head. "Betty, the school is not empty. It's just your class that's empty. I've received calls from the parents of 18 of your 20 students. I have a feeling that the other two children are simply not needed." Well, you understand. Either way, parents want to take their children out of your class. Some of them were vague or didn't give a reason, but most said they didn't want their kids taught by a city bitch. I don't think there's an easy way to tell you this. "I'm fired, right?" I asked. "No," he said, looking down at his shoes. "Honestly, I wanted to fire you, but our lawyer said we need to consult with the teachers' union first. So for the next couple of days, you will be helping out in the office." "What about my class?" I asked. "Miss Barbie will teach your class," he said. "She's probably our most popular new teacher, and she doesn't have her own class yet." "But she's only been here a year," I objected. "According to your rules, we do not receive our class for 3 years." "To the office." "Betty," he said. I was furious. I spent the day at the office. I filled out forms and performed other tasks that were both pointless and trivial. Most of the women in the office didn't talk to me, even though I'd known them for years. I also noticed that the only people who approached me were those who were in a hurry, and only when everyone else was busy. Some of them immediately grabbed a large bottle of hand sanitizer after touching any documents I handed them. It seemed funny to me because I didn't even contact them directly. But it didn't matter. It was just a job. I simply did what was asked of me. I used this time to think about ways I could get my husband and son back. At the end of the day, I had several plans. I returned to my parents' house, and as soon as I walked in, my mother handed me the phone. "Betty, this is Dennis Colton. You left today before I could talk to you. I have good news for you," he said. "I can go back to class tomorrow," I smiled. No," he said. "But you don't have to get up early tomorrow to come here." "Are you firing me?" I asked. "Unfortunately, this is not the case," he said. "The union lawyers voted, and they agreed to allow us to fire you. But our lawyers believe that by doing so we could expose ourselves to wrongful termination claims. Therefore, while they study the legal side of the issue, we are placing you on administrative leave. You will continue to receive a salary, and this will free you to settle your personal affairs. I would appreciate it if you would forward all your grades to Miss Barbie." I hung up in shock and returned to my room. When dinner time came, I told my mother that I was not hungry. A little later, Dad came up and said that one of my friends was calling me. "Who is this?" I asked. I really needed a friend at that moment. "How can I know?" he answered. "She sounds really sweet and has a southern accent." "Hello," I said into the phone. "Betty, can you please send me the grades for my class?" she said. I recognized Rhonda. It was like her to kick someone who was down. "Well, I guess you're happy about that," I said. "Are you so happy that you're ready to burst? Taking my class must have been the highlight of your week, huh? How many times did you sleep with Colton so he could give you my class? Did you divulge my problems to everyone at school? So, is this your revenge for what happened in college?" "Betty, calm down," she said softly. "I am a professional teacher. I didn't ask for your class and tried to refuse it, but Mr. Colton insisted. Why would I put myself in a situation where the outcome would be so unfair? These kids loved you. Now they are confused and feel betrayed. I will be constantly compared to you. At the same time, my parents will keep a close eye on me to make sure I don't do the same thing as you. Who needs it? And about the past. Yes, Betty, I hate what you did to me. Hunter was an asshole. But he was my asshole. I guess I should be grateful to you because if you hadn't started dating him behind my back, I could have married him and he probably would have been the same person as your lover Greg. It could be me, sitting now and crying over a man who is not worth two dead flies. I should really be grateful to you, but at the same time, you knew that Hunter was mine, but you still slept with him behind my back. And she did this for months. The only revenge I want against you will not be through a group of innocent children. I'll hit you where you hit me, but I will be open and honest about this. I want Danny, but I will give you the respect that you did not give me. I'll wait and see how things work out between you. He needs time and space to sort out his feelings. Rhonda, this is more than I deserve. I'm sending you the grades right now, I said. I got a beauty book and sent the grades. Then we hung up. A few seconds later, the phone rang again. I picked up the phone. Did you forget something? I asked. Yeah, there was one more thing I needed to tell you, she said in that same soft southern accent. Okay, what is this? I asked. Fuck you, she said and hung up. Danny, it's been almost 2 weeks since the concert and dinner with Betty's parents took place. Since then, my son and I have become even closer to each other. I tried to convince him to talk to his mother. I told him over and over that what she did to me had nothing to do with him. One day, she came to pick up some of her things and asked permission to talk to him. I told her that she didn't need to ask my permission to talk to him. He will turn 18 in a few days. He is an adult and can do whatever he wants. He just decided to stay home with me because it's the same house he's always lived in. She explained to me that he had not spoken to her since the concert happened, and even when she used her mother to call him, he asked her not to call again and refused to answer the phone when she called. She said she wanted to be able to apologize to him for any problems her actions may have caused. I called him down. While we were waiting for him, she tried to start a casual conversation. How do you feel? She asked. I just shrugged. I know exactly how you feel, she said. No, you don't know, I replied sharply. You don't know what it's like when the person you wanted to spend the rest of your life with wants someone else, and I had to stop because Jordan was coming down the stairs. When he saw her, he started to turn around to go back to his room. Jordy, wait, I called. Jordy, what happened between your mom and me has nothing to do with you. She loves you the same way she always has. I'm the one she stopped loving, so you should at least try. Betty turned to me with tears in her eyes. That's how we didn't have time to say anything because Jordan exploded. I'd never heard my son swear and couldn't imagine him ever yelling at one of us, but it obviously affected him more than I thought. He seemed to have inherited my ability to pretend things didn't affect him, so the rage he unleashed on Betty was a surprise. So you love me, huh, Mom, he screamed. You love me so much that you didn't even try to call me until 2 or 3 days after the concert. And with all that love, did you ever think about how small this town is? How do you think it feels like a son of the city slut? How do you think I feel when everyone is looking at me and pointing fingers? Mom, since you love me so much, you probably remember that I've been crazy about the same girl for 3 years. We finally found contact. We were going to go to the same college, and even went out a couple of times. But that's it, Mom. Her parents don't allow her to date me anymore, and they send her to another college to protect her from me, for love, Mom, but I'm better off without it. He turned and ran back up the stairs. Danny, everything you said is not true, she said. You're the only man I've ever loved. No one came close to how I feel about you. I made a terrible mistake, but love had nothing to do with it. It was sex, pure and simple, and that's not even sex. It's a very long story, and you need to let me explain it. Betty, the best way for us to talk is for you to get a lawyer so we can sort out this divorce. We have a few meetings coming up to discuss the terms, and we'll talk then. If there's anything else you want, I'll say, I'll arrange a separate meeting for you where you can talk, and I'll just listen, once we've settled everything. I love you, Danny, she said, and I always will. A couple of evenings later, Jordan told me he was going out for the evening. He and a few friends were going to Greg's house to watch movies and play video games on his 70-inch TV. He noticed the concern in my eyes. "Don't worry, Dad," he said. "He doesn't live there anymore. Amanda asked me to watch her kids while she's busy. She's a victim in all of this, too. She doesn't deserve what happened to her, just like you and me. Maybe all the innocent people in this situation must begin to support." I was pleased that he would have a chance to have a little fun. 30 minutes after he left, someone knocked on my door. I opened it and Amanda was standing in the doorway with a pizza and a bottle of wine. She walked into the kitchen and, having been here literally hundreds of times, she knew where everything was. She took a couple of glasses and plates from the cabinet and placed them on the table. She left her coat on, but sat down opposite me. "Danny, how did you know?" she asked without preamble. "It was pure luck," I said sadly. It was still painful to talk about, but she deserved to know. I probably loved Betty too much. I had a laptop that our art department had set up for me at a very high cost. I gave it to Betty. I thought it would help her as a teacher much more than the cheap ones they give to teachers in school. So I used a flash drive to transfer my data and drawings from my office computer to my home computer. One day I forgot the flash drive. I decided to rush home to grab it and go back to work. I thought Betty was at school as usual. When I arrived home, Betty's car was not in the driveway, but Greg's Challenger was there. I didn't even think about it. Greg often skipped work and hung out in my garage. All the band's equipment was there, and he came over to play. Amanda's face tensed and her lips pursed when I said that. "Danny, Greg and I have 3 kids to support," she said. "Didn't you think I needed to know that my husband was skipping work?" "Amanda, he was." "Well, he was my best friend," I said. "At least that's what I thought." Anyway, my plan was to go into the house, get the flash drive, and then go out into the garage and scare the crap out of Greg. I walked into the house and went to the office to get the flash drive. As I approached the living room, I heard noises, so I looked in. They were so busy that they didn't even notice my presence. "Amanda, I don't want to." "Danny, I need to know," she said. She reached across the table and stroked my hand. It was terrible. He took her to another place. The sounds they made weren't moans of pleasure. They were just purrs. She squirmed under him as if it was the best thing that had ever happened to her. It was like 2 animals. I was shocked. My first instinct was to go in and smash both of their faces. But I realized that if I went in, I could kill one or both of them. It didn't make sense to me. They kept insulting each other. He kept calling her a dirty slut, and she just smiled at him. They talked about us, about you and me, as if we were just a nuisance to their fun. "Do you want more?" he asked her. "We can't. We both need to go back to work," she said. "I hate rushing. I would like to be free and do this whenever I want and as much as I want." "I understand you," he said. "But for now. In the meantime, let's get back to the boring people who are ruining our lives," she said. "I hate going back to them." Anyway, I walked out of there. I didn't know what to do, but I knew we were done with Betty. Men are always the losers in divorce, so I knew I had to be careful. Over the next few years, for several days I avoided Greg. If he was around, I didn't show up. It was more difficult with Betty, but I managed. I pretended that I had to work late and found ways to be away from home. The weird thing was that the other guys in the band noticed that there was something wrong with me long before Greg or Betty realized it. They actually helped me develop plans for the concert. I also decided to give Betty the papers about divorce that evening as a birthday present. That way, at least, she would be away from one of the boring people. I never expected people to react. They look at her the way it happened. I just thought we would get divorced and never talk again. End of story. "You didn't mention something," she said. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "About you firing Greg," she said. "That you beat him twice and got him arrested." Amanda, I didn't fire Greg, I said. I didn't want to do anything that would hurt you or your kids. As for everything else, Greg was trying to unplug my cable, so no one would know he was involved in all of this. I was playing so I couldn't use my hands to stop him, so I kicked him. Danny, she smiled. I know you. I've seen how you treat drunks and people in bars while you're playing. Greg always talks about kicking people. You always say you stepped on their hands and waited for security. Okay, I admitted. I was angry at Greg and lost my cool, but he started first. What about a restaurant? She asked. I just wanted to quit my job with Betty's dad and give her the divorce papers, I said. Greg burst into the restaurant screaming and yelling about how I ruined his life. He tried to grab me and hit me, so I hit him and left. Again, he started first. I was done with him. My whole plan for revenge was to humiliate him at the concert and break our friendship. I did not seek his arrest or anything else. I thought that humiliating him and expelling him from the group would be enough. Either was or ever will be. But of course, I also lost my best friend. And what about Betty? She asked. Betty was just going to walk away awkwardly. No, Betty and I are done, I said. We don't stand a chance. The other guys don't deal with Greg anymore either, she said. They feel betrayed by them too, I said. They don't trust him. We're all friends, but Greg and I were best friends. They decided that if he could do this to me, then no one else could trust him. I don't blame them. I wish it was as easy for me, she said. You and Betty both have jobs. Your son is an adult person who will soon be leaving for college. Greg and I have 3 young children and only one income. I want my children to grow up in a normal family with a mother and father. So no matter how much it hurts me, I'm going to take it back. I looked at her in shock. I just shook my head. Oh, it's not what you think, she said. I'm going to keep him on a very short leash. We also won't sleep together. I'm only taking him back for the sake of the kids. My lawyer drew up a very specific contract about what would happen if he ever cheated on me again, and we'll never do it again. Let's not have sex. I want to keep him until the children grow up, but I won't tell him about it. I'm also going to go back to school, so that when I get divorced, I can support myself. I nodded my head. I think I could understand her position, and I noticed that she was still looking at me. There is one more thing, she said. I need to get my revenge on him, and I need your help. Amanda, as much as I'd like to kick him, we've already run into each other twice, and neither of them made me feel better. In fact, it made me feel worse. You know how it feels when you lose someone you love you more than anything, and your best friend at the same time. Part of me wants to run to him to cry on his shoulder about the loss of Betty. But at the same time, I can't go to Betty and talk about how much I miss sitting in the garage playing guitar with Greg or practicing our golf games. I don't want to hurt him anymore, I said. I don't want you to do anything to him, she said. She stood up and unbuttoned her coat. She was naked underneath. My eyes widened and my mouth dropped open as the coat fell to the floor of my kitchen. I want you to do something to me, she continued. Amanda was completely different from my wife, Betty. Betty was taller and slimmer with small breasts and incredibly long, thin legs. As soon as the coat fell, my eyes were drawn to her large, heavy breasts. Her belly was round and slightly saggy. Her legs were much shorter and thicker than Betty's, but instead of imagining her wrapping them around me, I wanted to feel myself being crushed by those powerful legs. I think we should take this upstairs, she said hoarsely, and when she turned around, I noticed how her big soft ass was swaying. She turned and grabbed my hand, as I seemed frozen in that place. This contact and the look in her eyes determined my decision. I was still debating internally, but my body had already made its decision. But Amanda, if we do this, we won't be any better than them, I said. I already talked to them, she said. There are a lot of things going on that you don't know about. But believe me, this has been happening for a long time. They started it. They did this to us. We need to do something to regain our self-respect and prove to ourselves that there's nothing wrong with us, except that we're normal, healthy people, and we need sex too. Mentally, I still doubted, but my heart was beating so fast that I couldn't focus on anything else. Danny, we have other reasons for doing this, she said. If you're really done with Betty, you'll need someone, even if you don't have sex that often. On the other hand, since I'm not going to take Danny back if that doesn't happen, I bet I could make that asshole beg you to take me. Then she smiled. Danny, you're a good guy, she said. You're a much better friend than Greg deserves. You're still trying to find a reason why we shouldn't do this. Do you know why I smile so much? I shook my head nervously. Because I can tell that you want me very much. Greg, as much as he loves me, he never looks at me like that. And I want to feel it. Under no circumstances will I leave here to prevent this from happening. Jordan, I said, what if he comes home? That's why I make him look after the kids, she smiled. Besides, he might have to get used to my kids anyway. But he can't come home until I come home, so come and get it. She leaned over and wiggled her ass, and something clicked in me. I grabbed the bottle of wine and followed her up the stairs. Along the way, I started to undress. By the time I got there, she was already lying on my bed with the sexiest expression I've ever seen. She patted the bed next to her. Come here, she said. I cannot wait. You'll have to, I said. I put the bottle on the table next to the bed and took it in my arms. For a few moments, I just hugged her. I gently ran my hands up her sides, getting used to the difference in texture and density between her soft flesh and firm skin. She began to grunt and moan. I gently cupped her cheeks in my hands and pressed my lips to hers. I covered her face and neck with kisses. Then we had sex. After that, we lay there, hugging and kissing. There was a strange look in her eyes. She had the same expression that Betty always had. This got me thinking again. Was it fake or real? She stood up to look at her watch. Then we had sex one more time. Danny, she said lazily as we lay together. I was still gently squeezing one of her breasts and holding her ass with my other hand. Are you just fascinated by my breasts because you like them, or because Betty doesn't have them? She asked. No, Amanda, I said. Nothing we did had anything to do with Betty. It was just you and me sharing ourselves. And like you said, it made me feel better about myself. She purred. Danny, within the last hour or so it's changed from revenge to something else. Is there something you can do for me next time? What do you mean next time? I asked. Danny, I'm not a slut, she said. But it was very special. Before tonight, I had only had sex with one man, Greg. We were married longer than you and Betty, but we waited with the kids. In all that time, he never made me feel the way you did. Forrest may feel tonight. Most often, I feel like it's just something he wants so badly. Sometimes I feel like a bitch, and sometimes I just feel like an object for his pleasure. But you made me feel loved. I felt special. I felt you made me feel sexy. And for a fat old woman like me, that's something I can't let go of so easily. I have all sorts of things I want to try before I tell Greg that. What? I asked. Are you going to tell him? Of course, she smiled and kissed me again. Think about it. Think about all the pain he's caused us. He deserves a little pain too. And I can't think of anything more painful for him than knowing that while he's not having sex with me, someone else is doing it. To the point of exhaustion, and makes me feel things he never did. It would be even more painful if he knew it was you. But I'll leave it up to you. I haven't started repaying Greg yet. I'll also let you decide. Shall we tell Betty? Over the next few weeks, things grew tense between Amanda and me until one day she said we needed to talk. Danny, we need to sort out some things, she said. I'm a woman, but I'm not like Betty. I can't do what we did without some feelings. Either you have to marry me and adopt my children, or we're going to have to take a big step back. Do you even realize how often we are dating? I was with you 5 nights last week. I know, I said. I think about you all the time, and I dream about us. And I'm not just talking about sex. Danny, you dream about us lying around and dating, but, honey, I dream that you will give me a child. We need to back off a lot or decide to be together. Betty. It's been a little over 6 weeks since the concert. 4 weeks have passed since Colton fired me. I didn't care about his dismissal, but what bothered me was the pleasure with which he did it. He called me early in the morning and asked me to come to a meeting. It was the middle of summer, and 2 months before the start of the next school year, I heard that they were looking for more teachers. I got dressed for the meeting. I was sure that I would be reprimanded and warned that I should control myself, and the speech would be about how I represented both the city and the school, so I needed to maintain a professional demeanor. He came in, sat down, and smiled at me. It is both my pleasure and my duty to inform you that from this moment you are dismissed. This is OOLEN fired, he said. That's the wrong spelling, I said. To hell with the spelling. Just get out, he said. Since then, my life has gotten even worse. I applied to the only other high school in town. They didn't even agree to talk to me. I moved lower and applied to both high schools. I got one interview, but it seemed more out of curiosity than seriousness. I applied to an elementary school and wasn't even considered. I looked for schools within a 50-mile radius. I went through them in alphabetical order. I have already reached the letter G, and so far without success. Additionally, the divorce was moving at an alarming rate, even though I was doing everything I could to slow the process down. I gave Danny space, but I missed it so much that I was always in a terrible mood. I followed him from time to time, but he never came out. The only person other than my dad and the guys in his band who even visited him was Greg's wife, Amanda. I was sure they were meeting to share divorce tips. Just two lonely people, sympathizing with each other in their mutual sadness. It was the sadness I caused. I turned one of the most caring and dynamic men I knew into a recluse. Nobody. My son practically cut me out of his life. I almost missed his 18th birthday. The only reason I got there was because of Danny. He called me and told me to come. No matter what Jordan said, it was still his home, and he wanted me there. I got dressed for Danny. No one else mattered. When I arrived at the party, there were at least 40 people there. 10 minutes after I arrived, it was just Danny, Jordan, my parents, and me. Great job, Mom. How did you manage to clear the room? Jordan said. Thank God you came. There were too many people here. If you hadn't come, we would have had to party and have a good time. God, we would have had to share the cake. He ran upstairs and my parents left. I tried to start a conversation with Danny, but it was so difficult. Every time I looked at him, I felt pain. When I looked into his eyes, I saw only pain. This was a week ago. Today, I received a triple blow. I started out by being rejected from 2 interviews at different schools without any serious consideration. Then I had to go and get the final divorce papers approved. So by the time I got home, I was at rock bottom. When my father came home and threw his briefcase across the floor, I realized that he was furious too. Turns out Danny still couldn't let me go. Seeing me upset at the divorce meeting made him upset. He didn't return to work, and my father arranged some kind of unscheduled meeting. He needed Danny there to explain some technical details. So when he walked in, he was already angry. You really need to pull yourself together, he said. It seems like everyone is tired of this dying swan theater. I think you expect me to cheer you up and get emotional like your mom. But it's your fault. You did all this nonsense, and now you want everyone to wipe your ass. Land. Give the guy a break. Dad, you don't know anything about real life, I replied sharply. You're still living in the 60s. It doesn't matter what world you live in. Survival depends on resources, he said. Throughout your life before you met Danny, I supported you. When you were in college and acting like an amateur bitch, I thought you were trying to find yourself, like so many people were back then. I just looked at him. I didn't know he knew anything about what I was doing. I didn't say anything because you kept it out of the house, and I hoped you'd grow out of it. You were always my little princess, even when you were a bitch. But I felt pretty bad. Honey, I spent $40,000 a year for your college education. That's $160,000. You became a teacher in a small town. You were making $22,000 a year before you ruined that job. With that kind of money, you couldn't support yourself without a serious reduction in your standard of living. If you even thought about paying me back for college, it would take you about 200 years. But then in your last useless year of college, you did something amazing, he continued. You didn't find yourself. You found Danny. You fell in love with him right away and gave up your bad behavior. You also gave me someone who could help promote the company. And soon after that, you gave me a grandson who would eventually lead. You had it all, honey, but you ruined it. You put on your bitch costume again and broke his heart. Can't you see that you're tearing him apart? Stop fighting over pennies. Let him go. Let me give you some real-world insight. If I had to hire another production manager, I'd have to pay him twice what I pay Danny. And that's if I could convince him to come to this provincial town. If I had to hire another quality control director, then it would be the same situation. Then I would have to deal with the conflicts between them. Danny does both of those jobs, and I pay him like he's my son. So whatever you want in the divorce, just let him go and I'll pay him. It'll be cheaper and easier than replacing him. Dad, it was never about the money, I screamed. I'm dragging my feet all because I want my husband back. It's so hard for everyone because he still loves me. And I can't let go because I love him too. We shouted at each other for a while, and then I just left. I found myself in this bar, trying to get away and think. As soon as I sat down, someone took the chair next to me. Without looking, I said, I'm not looking for company, I said sharply. Being your companion almost ruined my life, he said. It cost me my job, my band, all my friends, and almost cost me my marriage. I looked up and saw Greg. He looked terrible, but he was able to squeeze out an ironic smile. Why are you smiling? I asked gloomily. I have a chance, he said. No divorce. She lets me come back if I want. Of course you will, I said. I really want to, he said. But she makes it difficult for me. I would do anything for that chance, I said with tears in my eyes. Don't be so sure, he said. First I had to sign a contract with her lawyer that if I ever cheated again, she would get every penny we had, and I would have to leave empty-handed. I would do it, I said. She had sex with some guy, he said. He almost cried. It was painful for him to pronounce every word, as if they were causing him pain. Clearly, the thought of his wife having sex with another man was painful to him. I think he understood Danny's pain better. I know she didn't lie because she showed me the pictures, he sobbed. She did everything we did together. Well, except for all the disgusting things. She said he was better in bed than me. She said he was more patient and made her feel special. Can you imagine? I was married to her all these years, but someone else made her feel special. I saw how much it hurt him. She then said that if I wanted to come back, we would probably never have sex again, but she could have sex with this guy whenever she wanted. I also have to earn my comeback. I can go home, but I have to sleep in the garage. I urgently need to find a job, and I only have the right to go to work and return home. Damn it, I said. That's not all, he said. That's where I need your help. I need to find Danny and apologize to him. And I have to ask Danny to have sex with Amanda as revenge if he wants it. I have to literally beg my best friend to sleep with my wife. But if I go up to Danny, he'll try to kill me. He hates me now. Can you help me? Are you ready for all this? Would you put up with it? I asked. He simply nodded his head. He was completely broken. I would too, I said. I would agree to this without hesitation. Danny. The day we signed the final divorce papers was bittersweet. On the one hand, it meant the end of all the drama and a chance to leave all this pain behind. On the other hand, seeing the pain on Betty's face reminded me of two recent conversations I had. When I talked to Amanda yesterday, yes, we still slept together. She told me a few things I didn't know. Amanda felt that I should take some drastic measures like she did and then bring Betty back. She was sure that Betty loved me very much. She explained some things to me where I was wrong. When Betty and Greg talked about boring people, they weren't talking about us. It turns out they both didn't really like their jobs. The boring people were actually their bosses and colleagues. She showed me something on my own recording that I hadn't noticed before. While Greg and Betty had sex, each time she called him Danny. Amanda was confident that Betty would never risk losing me again, but I didn't believe it. The second conversation I had was with Greg. Amanda told me it was something to look forward to, but even knowing he was coming didn't make the conversation any easier. "Danny, I'm so sorry, man," he said. There were tears in his eyes, and he spoke from the heart. He seemed like a different person. After he apologized, he bit his lip and started talking again. "Danny, I would do anything to fix this," he said. "So if you want, I know she's not your type, but you can come over and have sex with Amanda if you want." He looked like he was swallowing something nasty when he said it. "No, thanks," I said. He started telling me things about her that I already knew, like how big and soft her breasts were. He got down on his knees and started begging me to just come in and take her any time I wanted. "No, thank you," I repeated. I just couldn't take any more pride from him. And the thought of telling him that I did things to his wife that he not only didn't do, but would probably never be able to do was too cruel. I'm not the kind of person who kicks someone who's lying down. He nodded and walked away, but then turned and came back. "Danny, do you really think you and I have?" "Never," I said sharply. Again, I saw real pain, but he tried again. "Danny, you should really think about giving Betty another chance," he said. "I know we did what we did, and it was a big mistake, but this woman loves you. She's always loved you." It turned out that John was in some way responsible for Greg getting fired. John felt bad about the way we ostracized Greg. He shared this with his pastor, who told him that we did the right thing. The pastor then told several of his most godly parishioners, including Greg's boss and Betty's school principal, and the rest was history. So that day, as we signed the documents that made us essentially unrelated to each other, Betty's pain touched me. "Dinner?" I asked. "Aye," she replied back. I nodded. "Yes, please," she said. While we were waiting for food, she looked at me. "Okay, explain," I said. "Explain what?" she asked. "You kept saying you wanted to explain things. I loved you with all my heart. So I would like to know why we stopped loving each other," I said. "We haven't stopped, Danny," she said. "I still love you and always will." She spent over an hour giving me a tear-filled explanation that was very close to what Amanda had already told me about what she had heard from Greg. Her tears and pain affected me again, so I tried to let her go gently. "Betty, we have a son together, so we'll always be there for each other," I said. "And I will always love you too. We need time apart. Then we need to start dating." "I'm ready to date now," she said. "Betty, I was going to say that we need to date other people," I said. "We need to be given a chance to heal the wounds of our divorce and the reasons for it, and then we can try to be friends." "I don't need to date anyone else," she said. "Never again. I don't need other men. Can we just move on to friendship?" I just looked at her and smiled. "And can we be friends like you and Amanda?" she asked flirtatiously. I just looked at her. I could tell by the way Greg was describing what Amanda told him about how the woman she had sex with felt. She said, "He's too stupid to understand." "Well, I need time," I said. "So I'm going to go on a few dates. Besides, I've already set up a date with a lady I met." "But after this, we can begin our friendly communication, right?" she asked. I got the impression that she expects more than just friendship. "I guess," I said. "Good, because I'm going to be friends with you to that extent," she said. "I'm warning you, once I start being friends with you, You won't have the strength to be friends with anyone else. I still feel guilty about Amanda, I said. True, she said. It would be a shame, a shame, a shame to ruin someone's family when you could have your own. But I'm still going on dates. I started. Yeah, she said, it doesn't matter. Once I get you back, no one else will even matter, just like before. In fact, we'll probably end up getting married again. But this time it'll be even better. I'm not going to work. I'm going to devote all my time to us. But I'm still going to, I began. Yeah, she said. I think you only need 1 or 2 dates with her. Any more would be a waste of our time. Where did you meet her? What's her name? I met her at a concert, I said. She's small, but very pretty. She's got all this long, honey blonde hair. Her name is Rhonda and... She stopped talking and her mouth fell open. Oh God, please no, she said. End. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.